It is now 5 p.m. on September 13, 2021. I now call to order the Policy Committee meeting for the Belton Independent School Board of Trustees. Along with myself, Ms. Janet Lee is in attendance, along with Mr. Chris Moore. Therefore, a quorum is not present. This meeting was duly posted as required by the applicable provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act that are contained in the Texas Government Code. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, sir, you do have one.
We have one? Okay. Ma'am, would you
Thank you, sir.
appear? Yeah. Would you kindly state your name? You've got 5 minutes. When you begin speaking, the timer will begin, and you'll see your time up there.
Okay, perfect.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Oh, Janet's here, so I was going to speak hers real quick too. My name is Brenda Howard, Belton, Texas, and I am speaking to agenda item 3C, EIC Local Academic Achievement. Let's pretend a football player is interviewing for a college acceptance under a scholarship program. The interviewer says, I see you are a quarterback. What was your completion rate average for your high school years? The football player says, I don't know. We stopped keeping track because the competition was harmful and unhealthy, so we eliminated it. On the upside, I have a passion for culinary arts and I have a delicious quiche recipe. I am a happier person for it. We would never eliminate stats, standards, and metrics in football. So why would we ever do this in academics? Ranking, performance, and ability are determined every day in the workforce when you go to work. High school is a training ground for professional success, choosing priorities, and establishing a strong work ethic. Do not eliminate the standards. I believe this is simply an attempt to bring equitable outcomes versus equal opportunity. We had comments from our group, by the way, when I speak, there's 300 other people. We had comments from our group, and I'll read some of them now. Texas universities, except UT, auto-admit the top 10% in the class rankings into public universities. UT is top 5%. And while there are colleges in other states that do not put considerable importance on class rankings, the reality is a large majority of BISD students are competing to be accepted and enrolled in Texas state universities. And we know Texas state universities use class rankings. As a teacher of a college preparation program, I do not agree with this at all. All of you saying, there were multiple comments, but all of you saying this will eliminate drive and motivation in our students are absolutely correct. And I already start teaching my students how to monitor their GPA at the middle school level and how colleges look at class rank in high school, which could determine scholarship opportunities and auto admissions. What the hell are they thinking? I also have a senior and a sophomore. They work extremely hard for their GPA and their rank. So this made me wonder, have you sent out a survey to the teachers and gotten teacher input? I know that there's been surveys conducted, but maybe teachers as well. This comment, this sounds very similar to everyone gets a participation trophy. I'm not in favor. We should strive for excellence. And this one said, it would also eliminate the motivation to work harder. Healthy competition is essential to mental, emotional, academic, and self-esteem growth. Some people are going to learn and grow. Some people are going to stagger and fall. But without a goal to work hard toward, nobody moves at all. And then the last comment, 2 of the board members have kids that are both my daughter's age, senior, and my son's age, sophomore. I would hope they are not for something like this. So obviously there is a concern with regard to what happens to the students who have already been working hard and seeking a GPA or a ranking. So there were no comments in favor of eliminating class rankings. As such, we are against this proposal and request that the board vote against it. Thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. We now have Ms. Janet Brown.
Sockets.
That's all right. Ma'am, you've got 5 minutes and the timer's up on the screen.
Thank you. Want to first thank you for the work that you're doing to talk about the policy. and to bring this all together and to more clarity, we looked through this. I do have a question on one of the items. It's under public comment procedures, and it's with regards public comment on items on the agenda shall occur at the beginning of the meeting. And then in red, it says at the presiding officers, oh no, that's not, sorry, wrong one. There's a lot of red on it. What it says is that you only get to speak once on an agenda item. Shall occur that you get to speak on agenda item once. And that was under your public comments section that we saw. So we had a question about that. Oh, here it is. Except as permitted by this policy and the board's procedures on public comment, an individual's comments to the board shall not exceed 5 and it's underlined 3 minutes per meeting. So does that mean that one person only gets 3 minutes per meeting? Or is it if there's like a public comments and then there's also an agenda item like a budget, like when we had the ESSA grant, so there was a whole another section that was available for public comments. So that would have allowed 2 opportunities to be able to speak in front of the board and address public comments on 2 separate items. So we had a question about that. What one clarification on exactly what that means.
Man, they can't interact with you. This is
I
just a
know.
public meeting.
I
You know that, right?
I know.
I want to make sure.
I know, but that was our question, because it just brought to our mind that if you come in, you sign up, that you're only gonna be able to speak once and you won't be able to speak onto another agenda item that may be of interest to you also. Even though, you know, your public comments may be about something else or something else that was on the agenda. So that was one of our questions on there. I know also that you have in your operating procedures, you have the breakdown about the number of speakers. It's on page 4, the number of speakers, and then the minutes that were allowed. You're starting at 3 minutes. I mean, 3 minutes is good and we can work with that, but like I'm already past 3 minutes right now. So we were looking, you know, on your sliding scale, can you start at 4 minutes? And then as the number of people come in, you're still gonna be able to get in, you know, what is your goal? To be able to have public comments contained within 45-minute period of time, if, you know, based if there's a lot of people, or is it based on an hour of your time? You know, granted, we understand the time limits and your time that you're there that evening, so we're sensitive to that also. So we kind of had a question and just concerned if there was any leeway as you're designing this policy on the minutes and the structure for that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. No additional public comments, Kai?
No, sir.
Okay, Matt, let's move down to item 3.
Mr. Chair, members of the Policy Committee, it's a pleasure to be here tonight and to welcome Ms. Wardell here tonight as well. And we're gonna dive into 3A, BED local board meetings and public participation as our first reading. I'm gonna have to walk down the hallway in just a minute and let somebody in and I'll come back, but we're gonna get the discussion going. So just so you know, you didn't say anything that ran me off or anything, I'll be right back, I promise. The policy that you see in front of you is based on deliberation that you've had in these meetings since June. We began this discussion in June of 2021 in a policy committee meeting where we actually were talking about board operating procedures. And we talked about the board operating procedures and a comment was made that we really needed to look at how we make things more clear for our public and make things more clear in our procedures for public comments. At that time, we also noted that in order to do so, we had to amend policy BED local. So that's what initiated this discussion on BED local and this policy. The policy that you see before you, I believe, reflects the discussions that we've had in these meetings and in consultation with our attorney I believe reflects best practice for us throughout the state, and consistency throughout most of our neighbors regarding length of time at that 3-minute mark. So, Holly, is there anything that you'd like to add for the board?
The items that are highlighted are the new, kind of the new statements in this version. And those include not having posters at the posters at the speaker's podium, should you show desire, and then clarification on who people hand their written materials to before the meeting starts, before public comment. And then the last item that is highlighted is also struck through. Previously, we had said attendees shall not bring posters to the meetings, but you all had some concern about that, and so we kind of shifted that and just changed that to say, don't take those to the speaker's podium, but they can have them in the audience as long as they don't obstruct the view of other people who are wanting to watch the meeting. They don't become a disruption. So those are the changes that we made since the last time we met. If you have any questions?
You know, based on the public comment we just had, I do have a question about the 3-minute limitation per meeting. Because in a meeting, you can have a budget meeting, right?
Right.
You know, public meeting, or
Public
a
hearing.
meeting on a budget, and then you have your regular meeting, so you're having a meeting within a meeting, right? So, Holly, what's the law on that?
But the law is that people must have, it's not limited to citizens or residents of your community, must have an opportunity to address the board. The board, on any item on an agenda, which is why we said for non-agenda items, which the board doesn't even have to entertain, we've given the chair some flexibility to put those at the end of the meeting, you know, should business dictate. But with respect to the 3 minutes, I mean, and what the law says is the board can have reasonable rules to make the meeting orderly. And so you can set the amount of time that each speaker gets, and that says per meeting. It doesn't really address public hearings, you know, so that's a good point. I mean, that's you know, clarification that the board can make if it wanted to, but what I've seen is that most districts are saying, putting a total amount per meeting, in case you have somebody who wants 3 minutes per item on the agenda, to kind of clarify, because in some communities, they have individuals who might like to comment, you know, X number of minutes on everything that's on the agenda. And so this is an attempt to try to manage that.
So if you have a budget hearing, and then you have your regular meeting, the law does not require us to hear 6 minutes.
It
3
doesn't,
minutes?
Right.
Okay, just 3 minutes per meeting, irrespective of what is occurring during that meeting.
irrespective of what the items are on the agenda.
The agenda. It just so happens that in that situation, there's a budget hearing along with all the other things that we normally have.
Mhm.
Okay.
So, got an option there.
Any concerns about that, Janet, Chris, about?
You know, I would have assumed that the 2 comment periods were separate. I mean, just thinking about it out loud, right? I mean, I would have assumed that the public comment at the beginning of the agenda is different than the public comment period that's part of the public hearing.
The way I've seen that operate is when it gets to the public hearing portion of the meeting, it's contained within an agenda that has the practice I've seen so far allows anybody who wants to come speak at the public hearing to come also speak. So, so it's not really,
Yeah, I mean, we typically announce the opening of the public hearing part of the meeting, opened for speakers separately, and then closed the public hearing, and then gone back to the meeting. So, yeah, so I would have assumed you could have potentially spoken twice, but. I'll pick it up now. I've got to actually go back and scan this again, because I wasn't thinking about it that way.
Well, my concern would be we need to comply with whatever the rules are.
Right.
Whatever the law is in that instance. I guess if we leave it the way it is, we either have to go 3 minutes or we allow in 6 minutes. in situations where there is a hearing on a budget, for example. I don't know how many other situations where we have a hearing within a hearing,
Are you hearing within a meeting?
within a meeting, I'm sorry.
You could have more than one public hearing at a meeting. I don't think I've ever seen more than two at a single meeting, but it's possible you could have two public hearings. So that would be, you know, if we wanted to, you could change up or add something. I don't know that I would take it out per meeting.
Well, in my time on the board, I don't think I've ever seen hearing within a meeting other than for a budget. Janet, do you recall anything else?
No. And my thought on this is, to me, that's not different than different agenda topics.
Right,
So, the 3 minutes per person at a meeting, no matter how many topics they wanna speak on, it's just, does it matter if there's also a hearing on a budget or
Right.
also a hearing on something else? To me, it's all the same. It's different topics,
We can-
it's
we
within the
could have
same.
20 topics one night and 10 on another night.
To me, that's the same
Right,
thing.
that's the way I feel about it.
I still don't see it the same. Because, you know, potentially in a public hearing, it's, I think you're allowed, basically Q&A, like back and forth, right? I mean, about the topic at hand, but it's different.
I don't think so.
I'm not sure that there's the Q&A back and forth, but it's an opportunity for people to come
No Q&A?
make a statement.
It's still a meeting of the board, correct?
Correct,
Just because there's a budget meeting, hearing doesn't change the
Yeah.
dynamics of that.
correct.
And furthermore, we've never opened another section of public comments when we open a hearing, to my knowledge. I've
No.
never heard us do that. So that would be changing literally.
That we do every time. We don't open a separate public comment window,
That's
but
what
we
we-
do open for comments from the public.
Yes, but not within a hearing.
Yeah, no, we absolutely do.
Typically, they've done them at the beginning. I believe if I look at your old board agendas, you've done the hearings toward the beginning of the meeting, and you've had public comment and comment specifically about that topic, is the way I understood it. I think at the last meeting, what we tried to do, and I think it more reflects a little more common practice amongst boards across the state, is where if you have a public hearing item, the comment period is directly aligned with the agenda topic on that item. So example, if we were in this agenda here, let's say that we had public hearing item number 4, you would have your public comment that would go along with that item at that agenda item. And I think that's pretty typical. You would know better than I would, Holly, I think on this one, but I think that's pretty typical. isn't it?
Yeah, usually you get to, now, you know, we're on agenda item number 4, is our public hearing on whatever. Do we have anybody signed up to speak on the public hearing? And then, I've not seen anybody in the 2 years that the new law's been in place, where any board said, well, no, you can't speak now during public hearing because you spoke earlier during public comment. I mean, I suppose I could under this, I just haven't seen that in practice.
I apologize, I thought that's what you said earlier, is that it's typical to only allow it one time. But you're saying it's pretty typical, if you had a public hearing, you would keep your regular public comment period, and at the appropriate time for the public hearing, that person would be able to speak again.
I haven't seen anybody try to do that, or anybody prohibited from doing that.
Gotcha.
So I don't, yeah, I will say it's common for this policy to limit a total amount per meeting. So I don't know that anybody's raised that issue to TASB Policy Service, or, anybody else really has contemplated this.
And you mentioned earlier about people speaking multiple times at meetings. Are there specific policies that you've seen that address that? Or is it that outline that specifically?
No, I've seen a total amount for one opportunity to comment. So if, whatever the total amount of time is for, 3 minutes per person, if they want to speak on 10 issues on the agenda, then they just have to speak fast, and they get 3 minutes. So it's not 3 minutes per topic,
3 minutes per meeting.
3 minutes per meeting.
But going back to Janet's point, I mean, it's on the, you know what the agenda is beforehand. So as a citizen, I guess you have to make an election as to what you're gonna speak on, right? Just like in any other meeting that doesn't have a budget hearing in it, you have to make an election as to what item you want, especially in a meeting like we're having today, not in a regular meeting, but in having today, you have to make an election as to what item you're gonna speak on.
Right. Because we've limited public comment and special meetings to items on the agenda.
Chris, what do you think?
I mean, that wasn't the mindset I was in when I was reading this, so I'm noodling it right now. Yeah.
And there's no, in the public, they call it a public hearing, but there's no dialogue between board members and the public.
It's usually, it's not usually typically a back and forth Q and A. It is same, very similar to public comment. Somebody comes and makes a statement
Right.
to the board.
But my question is since it's the board's meeting, does it change that flavor? I mean, does it now become an actual exchange between the public and the board?
Typically not that.
No, I mean,
It's just an opportunity for people to come.
so it's not really a hearing per se.
It's not a hearing in the sense that, like you would have a hearing in front of a judge,
Right,
where there's questioning and,
right.
back and forth, no questioning of witnesses and not any kind of direct examination or anything like that.
It's just another opportunity to give public comment on that particular issue.
Right.
But what would keep somebody from making public comments on something that has nothing to do with the budget during that time?
The chair could call them down and say, I'm sorry, this is not germane to the topic. I mean, more than likely, the person would be given their 3 minutes and people would scratch their head and try to figure out how that related to the issue, the public hearing. In theory, the chair of the meeting could call that person out of order and shut them down. if they wanted to.
Matt, what are your thoughts on this?
On this one, I think, personally, I think we can go either way. I think about it right now. You don't have a delineation in your process right now with the 5 minutes that says that somebody can only speak one time. I don't think that it says that clearly, does it?
It says you get 3 minutes per meeting.
Per
So
meeting.
I suppose somebody could say, I'd like to reserve a minute and a half for the public hearing. Somebody could do that if they wanted to.
But my point was, right now, I think it currently says 5 minutes, and we haven't delineated in the policy that currently exists that says you can only speak one time, but they could have up to 5 minutes to speak their case, and I think that makes sense to me on that one. So if they wanted to speak briefly on one topic and then speak briefly on another topic, in the public hearing portion, I think that's understandable. My take on it is this doesn't happen very often. It happens in rare occurrences. There are a couple different opportunities that we have to have public hearings. And I think number one thing we want to do, we want to continue to encourage public participation. We want to do it with some specific guidelines and boundaries along the way so that the board can do their job and do the governance that's needed for the school district as well. In this case for me, I think that I personally feel like this falls into that 3 minute window, but I don't know if I've ever heard it brought up before.
So you're okay with 3 minutes per meeting?
Personally, I am. And I think, we were just down at the Capitol today, and at the Capitol, you don't sign up 3 different times to talk on 3 different topics. In one hearing, you sign up one time, and you get 3 minutes to do that.
Right. Because remember, the objective is to conduct the district's business. That's the objective first and foremost.
I apologize, I'll have to step out for just a minute, I'll be right back. Dr. Golden will take care of it if you need it.
Chris, anything else?
And I would like to see us put some boundaries around when you can speak about that public meeting, right? In the, just like a special meeting. Like I would consider the public hearing to be a special meeting, and in special meetings, we can bound the comments to the agenda, right? So if we don't have something that says that a public hearing on a specific topic, comments have to be on that topic, I think we need to do that. Because it's not another open public comment, it's specifically around that item, so that, I mean, that's one change that you can put in.
We can look and see if there's a separate policy on public hearings
Yeah.
altogether.
You mean, just a policy that exists?
Yes,
Jen, you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I understand Chris's point on that. It's not my personal opinion, but I do understand, I do understand your thoughts on that 100%.
Yeah.
And I think that, either way we go, if we change any wording, can we still bring this to the board by Monday? I think that would be,
Well, I mean, nothing says we have to do it all together, right? Like, I mean, we've got in front of us essentially the public comment piece of it. There's no reason why we have to delay that. We can take multiple actions. So, like, I was thinking about that too, like, I would see no reason to delay what we've got.
We could take this whole thing just like it is, and then
and add,
add
if we should
something
add,
at
decide
the
to add
future. We could,
the budget meeting issue or the hearing issue.
right,
Right.
because it's not like it just comes up, once every couple months, it's once a year. Once a year, so,
Yeah. But I do feel like bounding that time to the topic is important, because that's why we're having the hearing. So if you wanna talk about something that's not in that hearing, you have something place to do it.
I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that.
so what are you saying? You saying they can reserve time on that particular issue?
I mean, I think for right now, yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, we want to hear the feedback, right? It's a public hearing, we're having a meeting we're having that period for a reason. So if you're gonna talk during that period, it's gonna be on the topic. If you wanna talk about something that's off topic, you do it during the public comment period, you don't do it during that public hearing.
So what are you saying in terms of time? I mean, what do you?
Yeah, I'm still wrestling with that one.
so usually, I think at those meetings, would you have, Connie, two sign-up sheets? One for the public hearing and one for public comment?
Right, I usually have a sheet for public hearing sign up, and then public comment forms are separate. And we do have other public hearings besides the budget. We've got
Right.
federal programs,
Right.
extra refunds, and more than one a year, but not very many.
So if we
Connie, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, what if we did this, Chris, what if we came up with a list of the public hearings that we have to have? And those do, like ESSER funds, I mean, when you have, they may not all be in policy, but some of them are already spelled out in policy. And, see which policies address that and come up with a procedure for how to deal with that when people sign up and they want to speak at the public hearing versus the
Right.
public. Because right now, we would have two sign-ups.
Right.
Two sign-up sheets. So-
That's what we're doing now, Connie, is that right? We have two
Right,
sides?
yes.
Well, that's how we're kind of treating it.
Yes.
We're treating it that way.
Yeah, if we're doing that, we might as well put some boundaries around it, I suppose.
If that's what we're doing.
Dr. Smith, we were just talking about, the fact that when we have a public hearing on an agenda, we actually have two sign-up sheets, at the meeting, one for the public hearing and one for public comment. So in theory, somebody could right now, I guess, sign up for both. But Chris is talking about, if you speak at the public hearing, then you need to be speaking about not that.
That's just a one.
Yeah, I wanted to put some boundaries around it.
Yeah.
And we were also discussing that we can still take what we've done here and present it to the board on Monday, and any additional thing regarding hearing boundaries, we can come in next time.
And you'd be okay with that?
I would.
I think that makes sense. Again, the goal in all of this, obviously the policy in front of you is what I recommend, but I think this is a good topic that was brought up, and to be clear and put the clarity in there for our public record, I think makes total sense.
Because the chair still, or the presiding officer still has discretion as to how to handle, if there's a large volume of folks sign up for either item, whether it's a special hearing or an agenda item, he still has discretion.
Yeah.
But since if we're doing, the thing that gets me is if we're doing two sign-up sheets, then
I didn't know we had two sign-up
Yeah,
sheets, so.
I didn't know either until now. Yeah, that gives me a different thought on that. So I guess what we'll do is we'll present this at our meeting on Monday as a second reading, and then we'll work on that. I guess you can tell us how many meetings there usually is.
Yeah,
Of course, like the extra fund, that's incidental, I mean, that was just,
it's an incident,
that happened because of the times.
right.
Um,
But there are some that you have to do a public hearing
Every
on
year.
And so we can come up with a list of those and see whether you think we need something else in policy or address something in board operating procedures.
Yeah, we can just add one paragraph in situations involving public hearing, this is how things are gonna be handled.
I'm good with that.
I think, a couple other things to point out real quickly. I know this committee specifically talked last time about, not wanting to go under 2 minutes. And what we didn't want to do is stick that in policy because we want to, depending on the circumstance, want to create flexibility for the presiding officer of the meeting, which is the board president. But in practice, and each year when we review the board operating procedures, I think those are things that are valid for us to do. We put a sample sliding scale in the board operating procedures just to give everybody an idea of exactly what way we could approach that. And I think over the next couple of years, we'll see how this works, talk through it. Each year annually, we review the board operating procedures and see eventually if you want to have any language in there about 2 minutes. But I think this time our recommendation would be to leave it as we present.
One other thing, if I could request that we all get like a copy of what the new form will look like for the public. And what information they would be given or what they would see, or even if they were to go to a link on the website. What
Absolutely.
they would
I can do that.
Has the agenda item blank always been there?
Yes.
It has, okay. Man, are we gonna go to part B now, or?
We would, if y'all are good with BED local as it stands, for your first reading, and with the addition of the, public hearing language that we can put in, potentially, then we're okay to go on to the board operating procedures, I believe.
And those are basically incorporating the same changes from BED local. The most extensive change this time is under board training. There was an addition of all the board training requirements. And that is really the biggest change from what we presented to you last time, in addition to what we just talked about with BED local.
How do you make this scroll through? We can't read it. They all have the copies where they.
I like what we have here.
Okay.
I mean, I think it's well written. Just a comment about the sliding scale. The presiding officer has discretion, so it's not like it's set in stone. I mean, he still has discretion. Sometimes you may need to use it. It just depends what's going on.
That's right.
So I like the presiding officer to have that tool in place.
And we thought it would be wise to leave that in the board operating procedures. Again, that's not local policy that's adopted, that's how the board wants to function and say this is the sample that we would recommend in these cases. And again, we can adjust that as this committee and as our whole board see fit.
Jen, Chris?
So would we put this, you talked about putting some on the website too, right? Would we put this on the website or not?
Potentially.
Right?
I don't think there's anything to hide on that. Board operating procedures are already on the website, and so I think there's a link to them. I don't think there's any reason to not.
Where I'm coming from is if somebody's coming to the meeting, I want them to know or have a pretty good idea in advance of what time they're gonna get so that they can prepare appropriately for that time, right? I would like to avoid pulling the carpet out from somebody at the last minute.
Absolutely, that's always our hope, and that's why we're trying to get more explicit in this. I think the way I would want it to read on the website though or something is if we put something like that, it would say sample
Right.
over the top of it, just so people know. And the only reason is that, again, we don't know exactly what the board meeting may hold or number of speakers that it may hold. And we want to be as transparent as we can with the public, but also realize that there's some flexibility that the board president probably needs to have in those cases.
And I would like to think that even though it says sample, because we've got it enumerated like this in the policy, that this more or less would be the right amount. I mean, yeah.
I think those are, personally, I think those are pretty good amounts. You know, I've spent a little time thinking through all of this, and I think these are reasonable amounts for going through public comments.
think this is the best one we've had.
Sure.
Personally.
So what we'll do is we'll move forward to the meeting next Monday and, for appropriate consideration for the whole board at that time. We will get additional language to you on policy BPD local as soon as possible so that you can make it before the month. You ready for our continued study of EIC?
We're ready.
So I know it's hard to
Where is
believe.
she?
I'm here.
There she
I'm
is.
here.
We've been talking about this since November of 2020, and so there's been a whole lot that's been going on. I appreciate the policy committee's learning and study on this topic. As you know, we are not anywhere near, I shouldn't say near, we are not to a point yet where we are recommending policy changes. This is about learning and study, and it has been for the past 8 months that we've been working on this. So Dr. Lovesmith has an overview for y'all, I think, in a whole lot of slides. And I don't think she's gonna go through everyone.
38 slides, I'm here all night, I'm ready.
We've already seen them.
I'm ready.
How about that?
I did put all 38 slides in there. I have 3 objectives for this evening and our purpose. One is to summarize our learning study, but I did include all those pertaining slides just in the event anyone did have any questions. And then to seek input on an upcoming board workshop. So at our October meeting, we are going to have the board workshop around EIC local. And so I really would like your input as a board member. You think about, we've been talking about this since November, but other board members have not been in this committee. And so how can we really prepare them well in that workshop? And then third, I do want to bring to you an option today because I want us to talk through it. And so it's not an administrative recommendation, it's an option. It's what we put our best minds towards as a starting point, but then want to have some really good conversation around. So with that, I'm going to go back just to our driving questions. We have 3 questions that have really driven us, and these came in kind of around this December, February, I think it was February, March, which we said we wanted to understand our policies and how they impact students in their college admissions process. We want to identify any barriers that could exist in our current policy to prevent students from following their pathway. And then we also wanted to look at how class rank and course rating could impact our journey to graduate competencies. And so, as we said, we've had rich discussion along the way. In December, we formally began in the policy committee talking about other policies. And we go way back to December of 2020, we looked at other policies from other districts. And what we learned in that was that no 2 policies are the same. And that everything we decide in EIC local and everything anyone decides in EIC local is really based on their district and what their district prioritizes to write that policy and what they want for students. So then we came back in February and we read an article on class rank ways down true learning. That was just from a national perspective, and we discussed that in terms of our own EIC. What we learned in that was that nationwide, many districts have moved over 50% about to practices that do not rank. However, we also know that Texas is different and that Texas does require you to rank your top 10% of your students. And then we know, and we discussed at that time, you have several key universities, University of Texas and Texas A&M, that have high practices for admissions policies in terms of rank. And in March, we came back and we discussed our policy, and this is where we really landed those questions and started to talk about, so over our time for studying, what data would we collect and what would we discuss? And at that time, we discussed that we collect data from our students through a student survey. We talk with colleges about their admission practices, and then we review transcripts from prior classes just to see what that looked like in terms of GPA ranks, number of AP courses they took, number of dual credit courses they took. And so then we did just that. In April, we discussed the student surveys. We talked with students and that were at the high school level, and we asked them if they, we looked at how many AP courses they take. We asked them about their AP exam practices. But what we also learned in that was that many students communicated to us that they do not often choose elective classes that are of interest to them because of our EIC local policy. And those elective classes were pretty much every CTE course that we offer. Those are not currently in our policy weighted. Then we came back in May and we discussed our conversations with colleges. And remember then, we learned that colleges do look in their admissions practices for advanced courses. And they define advanced courses as AP courses and dual credit courses and on-ramps courses. But just like high schools, no colleges are the same. Their admissions practices are not the same. And their admissions practices within their own systems are not the same. So we talked about what it might take to get accepted into Texas A&M would not be the same as what it would take to get into the Texas A&M School of Engineering. That even within a college or a university, no two criteria are the same. And then in June, we looked at the transcript review and we found that the majority of our students can take anywhere from, to be in the top 10%, they're taking up to 15 AP courses. We saw GPAs that are very close and rank with one another. And we saw that there was a heavy preference for AP over dual credit. We came back in August and we discussed EIC local once again, only this time we looked through the lens of our course catalog. So we looked at what does the state require to graduate, and then we also looked at a sample schedule of a four-year student just to see within their schedule, could they take the four-year CTE pathways of interest if they wanted to, even though we knew in that survey they said they didn't choose it. We did look at how could they choose it and where does that go in a schedule should they want to. And here we are today, again studying EIC local and planning for the board workshop, and then we're going to look through just a policy option or one way we might consider calculating. That was a pretty high overview. I don't want to leave anything out. If you have any questions on that or anything you want to add, just kind of on that overview summary.
Deanna, would you mind just stating the number one reason why we embarked upon this study?
Because we want to, I go back to our driving questions, that we wanted to look at our policy to determine if it prevents barriers from students following their pathway through CTE course selections, their pathway to a college for college admissions. Does our policy create barriers in there?
That's cool, thank you.
And I failed to introduce, but I do want to introduce before especially before we talk through the proposal. I have several folks here tonight from our department. Barbara Epperson is our coordinator of advanced academics. Tiffany is our director of academic advising and counseling, Tiffany Sommerfeld. And Holly Moore is our director of accountability and intervention. And when we get to talking through that, you can ask me questions. I might phone a friend next door. They're here to really help. We put a lot of great minds in what we're going to propose tonight. So with that, do you have any questions on what I shared? So again, here's those, like I kind of identified out from those each points what we were looking at, because we're wanting to open a pathway that's personalized for our students. And there was some more information just on those high leverage points of our key findings. I won't read those all again because I just kind of covered them in that overview. So with that, we got two things we want to talk through: the discussion of what the overall board needs, and then also I want to propose to you a policy for what we might look at as calculating. So this is a little bit of which comes first, the chicken or the egg. I don't know if right now you would like me to show you if we want to talk through a policy option. Does that provide you with better information for then what we might include for the general board? Or do you have some initial thoughts that what the general board would need in more detail than what I gave you?
And I also want to be clear, this is not a first reading of a policy.
Oh, absolutely not.
This is based on what you all have asked for, that we come back, talk about an overview for the entire board, and talk about what policy options we may have. And so we started putting pen to paper based on the discussions that have been happening over the past 8 months. So that's why we're here today, so I wanna be clear, workshop, nothing is moving forward as far as a recommendation. This is really about starting to feel things out with the policy committee to see if we're heading in the right direction.
I wanna see what you have.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move to a whiteboard because I wanna talk it through. And it, was best to approach it that way. So if you'll recall, we currently have a 4-tier system. We rate AP courses in our highest tier. We rank dual credit and pre-AP in our 2nd tier. We have on-level courses in our 3rd tier. And then our 4th tier are modified courses. And we do not weight any CTE courses other than if they count for a core class. We weight all English courses, all math courses beyond Algebra 1, all science courses, and all social studies courses, and all languages other than English, so your Spanish, French, German, we rate those all above a level 1. The reason we do not currently weight level 1 is because those are taken in middle school, and so we've chosen as a system years ago not to weight towards your high school graduation a middle school course. Okay, so what it did was we got our teaching and learning team together. These are all of our coordinators and our directors, and said, based on everything we've been talking about, what would be one idea we could start with to start the conversation? Now, our team finds great value in the national approach for non-ranking. I mean, there you can see a lot of merits in that. However, with Texas being a ranking state and knowing where our community is, we are proposing we're talking through a weighted system tonight. So in tier 1, where we currently have all AP courses, so any AP course you take, we could consider as a group to weight up to 8 AP courses. College Board tells you that between 5 and 10 is the recommended number of AP courses. And remember, these are designed to be college level courses. Now, why 8? Because when we look at it, we would like to even further break that down to be during a sophomore and a junior year. You could weight up to 6. Why before junior year? Because August 1 is when college applications open up. And so you would really want to think through to a first student, how could they have taken those courses before their college admissions. However, if you open them up to all, we still have these barriers for for electives and students choosing other courses of passion. We would then add for their senior year to go ahead and get up to 2 more. In our thinking around this, a couple things we were thinking would be that students would choose the course to weight before taking it. So this is one of those things that remember we're opening up students to follow their passions and their pathways. If I am an English and social studies major, that's what I want to do, that's my passion, then I really could focus on my AP courses being all the English and all the social studies. And it would follow what I'm most interested in. It would take pressure off of me to be in a gaming scenario where I might take a math or science course. It's really not following my passion. In this process, we would actually stop the rank. One of the things we propose is no ranking for 9th graders. The rationale behind that would be that we're not recommending that 9th graders choose an AP course for weighting. They could choose and take AP Human Geography. It is a course that we offer now. It is a 9th grade course. It's a hard course. And we've really tried to just think through everything in our discussions. And what we know is there's a time when 9th graders are 9th graders and they need to really kind of get in and experience high school before some of the higher stakes are involved. And so this is something, now I just wanna really stress at this moment, again, we can talk through any of these. So as we talk, put something up here and I'll get through, then we can talk away with what sits well or doesn't sit well, in this. That's probably gonna be right here in tier 2.
Anna?
Yes.
Quick question. Okay, so
Absolutely.
if you downgrade ninth graders, but you got a ninth grader that comes in and is, I mean, they're ready for an AP math course.
Mhm.
That's what they need to take. That's what
Absolutely.
they're ready for. Would that never count in their GPA?
So, AP courses only start in their sophomore and junior year in terms of weighting at the highest level. I'm about to answer that question in tier 2, because in tier 2 level courses, we would put all AP courses. So if I take 15 courses, 7 of them are gonna live in tier 2 weighting purposes, and 8 are gonna go up to tier 1. Remember, tier 1 has a higher weighting. So I'm gonna get my 8 courses that I really wanted to take, but I'm gonna open this up for some other things. Does that make sense? So you may keep going, and did I answer your question,
It
or?
would still count as, so that exact example is a freshman, it could still count in tier 2, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Absolutely,
But it wouldn't count in tier 1, which would be the highest weighting, but it would still count for the student in their GPA calculation.
right. So in tier 2, we would rank all, and I apologize, this would be AP courses and on-ramps. I'm sure someone on my team was wanting to correct me, but wasn't gonna say it yet.
First time I've ever heard them not correct.
I know, they'll correct me when y'all learn all around, I promise you. The reason for allowing this, or putting this in there, is because we feel like, they both lead to a college credit, they're both taught by teachers in our system, we have lots of input in the scope and sequence, and they both lead to college. So we felt like that, and currently we offer pre-calculus. Tier 2, we would again wait, before I put AP, I'll leave AP, I already wrote it, but we weight courses in ELAR, in math, science, social studies, and languages other than English. We currently weight those, we would continue weighting those with AP, dual credit, pre-AP, on-ramps if it wasn't a course that you moved into your tier 3, on-level courses, and CTE, year 3 and 4 courses. Now, this is a stretch for the current system. The rationale is that if we're looking at opening up for students to choose courses that follow their passion and interest, we would create within our system of ranking the flexibility for students to choose which courses they want to challenge themselves in. But it would there would be an impact on their GPA. I mean, we would rank them the same depending on just however they perform in that.
You know, say that again.
And
Explain that part one more time for us.
So right now, in our current system, tier 2 is right here. Well, it's actually AP is different, but it's these courses. On level is a tier 3. What that automatically does when students are concerned about ranking and are quite honestly really playing the game in terms of gaining some points, and we see it a lot, then students that tier system forces them to take a pre-AP course in all 4 subjects. So if I'm an English and a social studies student, and that's really where I want to pursue my passion, and because that's what I'm interested in later, I will still take math and science in a pre-AP environment just because they're weighted differently, not because that's the course I want to be in. And then our tier 3 would be modified courses. Those are courses that are not taught on grade level, and the TEKS have been modified for that course.
So tier 3 is, they're not weighted, and then tier two's weighted some, and tier one's weighted even more.
Tier 3 are weighted on a 4.0. This would be a 5.0, this will be a 6.0. Because we currently have a tier 4 system, it goes 4, 5, 6, and 7. This will go 4, 5, and 6. These are modified, but remember they're only modified in your ELAR, math, science, and social studies, and LOAP. If we have a modified course in any of those, and we don't in LOAP.
I think I'm lost on what modified means.
I'm there with
Okay,
you.
so it could be a life skills class, it could be a reading class, it could be a any class where the grade level TEKs are no longer the TEKs for that course. So it's a class that is below grade level.
Those are students usually that are certified in IT, correct?
Correct.
And so what you're saying, Anna, is that you would potentially, a student would fall into one of these.
One of these three, and that's how they do now.
It's not one option over another.
No, it's how a specific course is weighted. So if I take modified English, then, and I receive 100 in it, it'll equate to a 4.0 when my GPA is calculated. If I take an on-level or pre-AP or an AP English, it would translate to a 5.0. If I take, if English for AP is a course I choose to have weighted, it would earn a 6.0. And this right here would be, so currently, we weight by course. When this model is added, we weight by student choice. So we could all be sitting in the English 4 AP course, and half of us could have it weighted higher and the other half would not be, it'd still be in the course. But for some of us, it might be weighted here. For some of us, it might be weighted here. And that's because this model allows for student choice.
Can there be crossover? Like, I'm in a modified math class, but I'm taking.
Absolutely, absolutely. So whatever course you're in each of these tiers is how that course is weighted. So I could be in a modified English class, but I could be in a pre-AP math course. And that's okay, then that's just how that would be weighted. The biggest change in this system is, and where we've had the most discussion, is CTE courses in our current system are not included at all. And this moves an on level to a tier 2, which is a higher level. And so those are probably the biggest discussion points. We internally had a lot of discussion on dual credit and whether or not it should either be included or if it would just be, many districts do not weight it at all. It's just, it doesn't help your GPA, it does not hurt your GPA. But we felt like based on all of our discussions, it's a divided community in terms of that we don't have the course catalog, we don't have the scope and sequence control for that course. We often don't have the teacher, so that's what, they're not our teachers. However, when we talk with colleges accept those, they consider them advanced. We have kids that are in TBI, earning associate's degrees, and we felt like, so right now it's kind of sitting in that tier 2.
What would make a student choose tier 2 over going with a tier 1 type?
Tier 1 is only 8 courses. So
So if you wanted to take more,
you can take them.
then.
If I want
you
to
would
take,
be in tier 2.
if I take 15 courses, because we currently offer 15 AP courses. If I want to continue with the practice of taking all 15 AP courses, I can. 7 of them will be counted on a 5.0 scale. 6 of them will go into, 8 of them will go into a 6.0 scale, correct? But the difference now is right now, we talked about when we talk with our students, many will take all 15 AP for that weighting purpose, and they will not take CTE electives, and yet they'll tell you, I'm passionate about culinary. I want to be in computer science, but they don't choose that course because of the weighting, and this opens up the door to do that. So in this model, I can decide, I'm a math and science major, and I'm going to go to med school. I can now decide, do I really need to take that English 4 AP course? Or would it benefit me to be in our med classes and get medical terminology and that entire health science strand? Because I really need that information as well, and that would better support what I want to do.
Have you run some scenarios on like this and this, like with our current students, for example? What it looks like with their GPA.
So we talked about that, and the reality is, when the students get to choose what their courses are, then we can't go back, we can go back and run scenarios for students.
Deanna, talk to us a little bit about how this 3-tier system you feel helps address those questions that you sought out in the study over the past 8 months. How would this help us in the long term?
So when we talked with students, we heard loud and clear that there were courses that they do not choose, and they are electives, and they were our CTE courses. So this, including of year 3 and 4, addresses that. It opens the door for a student to say, I want to pursue a 4-year pathway in a course. When we taught with our students about AP courses and the sheer number they were taking, then this says, you know what, we're gonna weight at our highest level 8, not 15. But we're gonna still let you take the 15 or take the dual credit. If you're not sure if you really wanted to pursue an associate's degree, you wanna get your college in, you could take, 10 of these, and then whatever you have to look at your schedule, and then, try to work in those 8 so that you can really balance what you're in. This just opens up for student option.
So you don't have to declare if you're tier 1 or tier 2, because that's the part I'm confused about. Like, how does a kid know if they're in a weighted?
So before a class, so beginning in their sophomore year, I signed up and I'm taking sophomore year AP World History. Someone look at me like, I don't have all the courses in front of me. AP World History, I'm gonna take it my sophomore year. Before that class starts, everyone sitting in that class has to decide, is AP World History one you're pursuing in your top, or are you leaving it in your tier 2? And they declare that. And we have a few, I think Tiffany is in a system, comes from a system where kids have declared what they want. If this is remember, this is not first reading. If this is a path that we want to go down, if this is something that's of interest, then we've got to work through all of those processes for what's the form you fill out, when's the deadline you declare by, how is that communicated, how are transfer students treated when they transfer in. You have to come up with all of those practices. This is just to kick us off in a conversation around, is something like that appealing?
One of the other things I think is important to point out is that it's a choice by class. And so when Deanna she mentioned it earlier, but nobody really reacted. I want to be clear, if you were an AP English class, because we all know those are the best classes, right? AP English class, and we were sitting in here, we could have that side of the room all have designated when they signed up for the class that they wanted this tier 1 status, in our side of the room had chosen it to be a tier 2 status. So you could have kids sitting in the same classroom earning different grade points basically in the class in the same content, but it's based on student and parent choice at that point. So that student and the parent have had an opportunity to weigh in and make that choice prior to the start of the class. That's a little bit different because right now, the majority of things that you see are Well, if I sign up for this class, here are the parameters that I have around it, and this varies it based on the individual student decision.
We really pushed our thinking around what would allow students to make choice, following what they want. You're not asking me, so I feel like I also need to talk through because I get a lot of questions on this right here.
Yeah.
So, there could be some discomfort with that within our system. And we have an idea if that doesn't sit well. But with any move we make, we're never gonna stop the gaming, the just buying.
And that was my next question, is for our kids who wanna gain it, which one are they gonna pick?
What do you mean?
Which one would you pick if you were trying to be in the top 5%?
Well, right now, I've opened up the door for me to take CTE courses like I've never had before. And then I'm gonna make sure when I want to choose what courses go into tier 1 out of here, I'm gonna move, so I'm not sure this might confusing people. I'm gonna live here, and I'm gonna take 8 still. I'm gonna take 8 of these and move them over here. But they're gonna be my choice now. I'm not gonna be all 15, I'm no longer gonna feel the pressure to take all 15 because I've now got these weighted the same. I do think the on-level causes some challenge.
So tell us more about the why behind on-level being in tier 2.
Because, again, starting really broad with student options and choices, when they're weighted the same, I no longer feel a pressure to be, to have to be in all those classes. I could choose to take courses that build upon my strengths. Now, if we pulled them out, because we could create a tier 3, move on level there, and then this would become tier 4. The biggest difference then from that move and our current policy is this has completely opened up still to all the choices for students, and we've added CTE. We wouldn't put CTE over here because the moment we did that, forget that. Then you've got kids just choosing these again, and you have the same thing we already have. But we could move that. Now that move, everything is a domino, right? You move one lever, it changes for another. So if I move this, it does perpetuate students to choose pre-AP and all their core. But this is a class ranking policy as well, so we gotta just kind of balance thought around what we think would be best for students and allow them to pursue. So, thoughts? It's a lot, I know.
If I'm a kid that only took 6 or 7 AP classes, like a fall for those all become tier 1 classes?
I had to declare them
them.
from the beginning, so I could not declare any of them. I could not declare any, and they could stay in this. I could just say, you know
Why
what,
would I not declare them?
you don't want the pressure. You just don't want the pressure on yourself. We wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I would recommend you declare it, but you might not want to. I mean, you have the choice.
But if I get an 85 in an AP class, it still comes out better if it's a tier 1 than it does.
Absolutely. But you've got to make that decision for what you're declaring before you enter into that class. And that's a tough one, and we have talked through that because if we don't, then you have people
Well, want to switch them out, right?
changing the points
Oh, no,
until the bitter
absolutely.
end,
I wanna
like
take
which
my best
one?
eight.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why you do it ahead of
My
time.
horse is
Right.
a little
Can't do that.
Absolutely.
Listen,
So fine arts and athletics they're no weights, which means they do not help your GPA, they do not hurt your GPA. They're just not put in, and along with CTE 1 and 2 courses. They're just, you're taking the course. Now, when I say that, when we report, colleges ask for 2 things. they ask for an unweighted GPA and a weighted GPA. And an unweighted GPA, they want every course you ever took, no matter what, give us the number, and everything goes in that. And then in a weighted GPA, they want what you have for policy. So fine arts or athletics does not help or hurt you,
We do actually have 2 fine arts AP courses.
unless they're AP. Thank you for that clarification.
Deanna, why couldn't we have on level and modified in the same tier?
We could do anything that we wanted to. The challenge I would have is this, a modified course is, not grade level, and that could be significantly not on grade level.
But it's also reflected on a student transcript if it is modified.
That is correct.
So if they got a 4.0, but it says a modified class, or they got the full amount of weighted credit, but it's a modified class, it still shows different than somebody who's in an on-level class.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we certainly could, that's a great point. We could have 3-tier system, and we could just have 3 and then have modified and on-level both. Stick with the 3-tier, and this is for class rank purposes, and just have it look like that. Absolutely. Thoughts?
I was,
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just sitting here thinking about what my boys would do.
Okay.
You know, I don't know. I would love for them to be here and like,
Well, it's a perfect example. You can go home and ask them.
You
right?
can go home and ask them, what would you do?
Wrapping my head around the dual credit.
I apologize, I about,
Yeah, no, thank you.
I'm sure you won't. get
Dual
to-
credit, is treated very differently across the state. You see, policies included at a lower level, you see policies included the same, you see policies not included at all.
So somebody could go through TBI, come out with an associate's degree, potentially ready to go to work. They could have aced all of TBI, but still not even be in the top 5%. They might not even be the top 10%.
No, when we did our study of our transcripts, we did find that there were, under our current policy, students that were in the top 10% that are from TBI. Not as easy to accomplish, but they are there. So in this model, I would just kind of guess, and I would let my team either challenge me or not. I mean, I would say you could end up in the top 10. It would be it could be a challenge to end up valedictorian or salutatorian. But there's a difference between getting in the top 10 and then being the top student.
Right.
well, it's sorry.
No, I'm
That's
saying that
the
based on the
path
fact I have
yeah.
kids right now that take like AP courses and get hundreds.
Yeah.
And so at the point that one student gets all hundreds, which can happen, then they're gonna outrank for this policy a dual credit
Yeah,
student.
I'm wondering if it cannibalizes the attendance, right, or the
That's my only
selection.
concern, is
Yeah.
it would discourage kids from doing a full program like some, I mean,
Because if that's the path I want to go, I'm going to take all the math and science AP I can, and I won't take TBI.
and maybe just take some CTE medical courses
Right.
instead.
So right now we have, would you say 10 on average to 12 students in the TBI program? And so, in our current practice, of course, I don't know that I can't answer that it has deterred students or not, because that's just what we have been ultimately in the program. So some do want to take an AP course. In a TBI program, and I'm a huge, TBI does some incredible things. It is a dual credit based program, and so there are, in general, Texas schools that would accept dual credit courses, whereas national schools may not accept those courses. And so students that are talking about going out of state, typically lean towards an AP course where it prepares them for any or for the AP college or AP exams are nationally recognized versus dual credit. But then even then, there's still so many factors in terms of what a college will or will not accept.
I was just gonna ask on that, is there a difference between public and private in the state of Texas that would recommend dual credit courses? So you go to a private university versus a public university, it is treated differently.
It is treated differently. It's up to in Texas, a public university is required to take the dual credit courses that are, they're like a standardized, I don't remember exactly what they're called, there's like 15 hours worth. Not even all of the TBI courses will fall into that criteria. A private university, it's up to that university as to whether they will or will not take it. It's also up to a university whether they will or will not take, now they don't take an AP course for admission, they can accept an AP exam, typically a three or higher, but even then, they sometimes only take 4 or 5. They sometimes don't take it at all, or they'll take it, but then they substitute in another course. So it just changes.
Like I shared with you with UT, they take the credit and then they make you take another.
Exactly, and then they make you take another
Because they don't trust the program.
Well, they either don't trust the program or they don't wanna lose the funding for their courses, because think about it, if I go in with a lot of AP credit, then I don't have to take those college hours and it's college dollars I'm not spending, so there's a lot that goes into this.
Deanna, is TBI the Texas Bioscience Institute?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you for clarifying. And we have students that take dual credit in both avenues. We have students that take dual credit through TBI, which means they go to Temple College, the Bioscience Institute. And then we also have students who just take dual credit on our local campus, our local high school, or some take the course at UMHB.
So I'm struggling with what's the purpose of ranking? And I'm not suggesting that we don't rank, right? But I'm saying, okay, so if we're gonna have a system that's ranking, what are you ranking? What are you recognizing by the rank? And is this get us there, right? 'Cause so when I think about it like that, I'm like, okay, I got tons of heartburn on level being in tier 2. You think, well, hey, we're ranking, right? And that's
Which
what it
is why when I wasn't asked that question,
Yeah.
I feel like I need to just present both alternatives of that, absolutely. But your question is exactly right. What's the purpose
Yeah.
of,
What do we say we want?
What
I
do we
almost
say?
feel like we need a mission statement of what are we trying to recognize by the rank, right?
Mhm.
And kind of based on what we say we want to recognize by the rank, that kind of informs
where we
what's on
go?
the board. And if we're ranking by academic rigor, if that's what we say we're celebrating by the rank, I mean, I don't know why you stop it at 8, you just throw them, I'm back to the beginning now.
I think the purpose is to open up choice
No,
and still,
I get it.
still allow kids to compete. I think that's what it is.
And I think for me, it's, a lot of these are about, we want students to be able to study things that are interest for them for long-term careers potentially, and go to the deepest level of studying those. And so when I see the CTE 3 and 4 courses in tier 2, that makes me happy because it's starting to open that up more in a conversation of, yes, I should continue with that CTE course sequence because that's the passion that I have in the future career that I possibly want. And I'm not playing the game of the weighting and the GPA along the way as much, even though it's still here.
But if you're number 1, you were just number 1 at choosing the right classes to put in tier 1.
Potentially, but
I think-
also,
Yeah.
but also where it equalizes is it's 8 for everybody. And it's of your choice and your family's choice. And so those students that may be able to thrive in one area, they have an opportunity now to say they can thrive in that area, and those are the 8 that they're choosing, which they might not have had that opportunity in the past.
This does value, so you use academic rigor, you mentioned that, and so I think we held true to why the 8 are here, or the AP is here, because those are.
So, question about New Tech. in regard to this. So, if AP is not offering at New Tech as much, or is in the future, how will this affect it?
So in our current policy, New Tech is a program of Belton High School. And depending on what decision is made in terms of that campus, then like right now, I can tell you that Belton High School and Lake Belton High School are weighted separately. And so they take courses at their campus and do not go to another campus to take a course. What we generally put, and what I see often in policies like this, are courses are weighted according to the offerings of that campus. And so so it's the same is true with, I have a student that transfers in and they chose AP, they took AP Chinese. We do not offer AP Chinese. So when that student transfers in, we write something in the policy that says that can't be weighted for them because it was not available to all students. And so as we address each campus, we could address that what is weighted in the ranking for that student at that school is based on that school's offerings. And then that would be applicable to New Tech and Belton High. It'd be applicable to Lake Belton High and Belton High. So you can't go over to another campus for one course that one campus doesn't offer. You know, we have those policies in place. We just would make sure it's addressed here.
It's a lot of deep work right there. That would be hours that have to have gone into that.
A lot of really talented folks that were in the room. So I guess I need to, I'd like to know your thoughts on it. I mean, so next steps is ultimately, we are going to need to propose a plan that goes into a first reading. And also then to have that followed as a second reading. We're not doing that tonight. We'll have one more policy committee meeting before the next board meeting, and at the next board meeting, we've proposed having a workshop with all of the board who've not been in any of these discussions. So I want to prepare them for that conversation.
September.
Is that right? Did I skip them?
Yeah, September, you would have the workshop.
That's a Monday.
Next week.
Yes.
Next week, yes, boy, I was giving myself a whole month I don't have.
I don't know what was going on right
I don't
there.
know what was going on right there because I actually have on my calendar tomorrow to work on the presentation because I need to get your input on what goes there. So we will not have a first reading prior to that board workshop. So I do want to know what from your thoughts goes into preparing those individuals. They have not been with us and in all of these conversations since last December. So I want to make sure, I don't know if I know this is an overview. What I could do with them is include these key findings from each of our meetings. We could talk through thoughts on that. Would that be helpful? To have those key findings? Do you think they need to see any of those graphs
I
or?
think they do.
I think they do.
Okay,
I mean, just from a general structure, right? I mean, it's, what is the problem we're trying to solve, or why are we talking about this,
Mhm.
right? Or based on what we were just talking about a second ago, what's our mission here, right? What are we trying to
That's why.
recognize?
That's why I asked for
Yeah.
you to restate it again.
Yeah, absolutely,
Make sure
right?
that
I mean, we
everybody
gotta start with why the
understands.
heck are we talking about this?
absolutely.
This is not to level a playing field. It's
Right.
not to remove competition. It's actually to remove the barriers that have been in place to kids' success.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
that's the focus. And the kids, I think it will open up a unique way for them to compete and to do better and to actually excel in what they love.
Yeah.
And it's just it's just a step towards that. It's not a removal of all our entire paradigm of school. It's
Right.
just a step towards helping kids be supported in their future success.
Yeah, so we've gotta be really clear on that.
I'm trying to broaden the learning experience.
So then you gotta follow it up with, well, what have we been talking about, right? I mean, I kinda like the calendar overview actually that you gave, right? I think that's good for the folks who haven't been in it, right? Just to
Absolutely.
give, like, from a process standpoint, here's what we've done. But, you know, to follow by, well, here's the facts that we think we learned.
So that's kind of what we did with these key findings, and so go through those with the board.
Right.
And I could put, so I have slides that pull out each of these, so like where I say 81 students typically do not choose an elective, well then there was a slide from one of our presentations that showed that very question out of the survey and shows that 81% in the courses that they named.
Ian, does this encompass, just ranking the top 10%? Or are we
No.
talking about,
Well, this encompasses, so once you rank, so that is a great question. Once you rank everyone in a class. And that number matters. So, you could not weight or rank, you could not rank certain, like students, include them in, but it changes your overall. So this will take, if we have 750 students in the class, you put all this in the formulas and it ranks them from 1 to 750.
So what you're saying is if we then at some point decided to only rank, say, the top 25%, then you change the whole calculation because you are basing it on a smaller set of.
You actually don't. You rank the entire system again. You just only once you get to the 20%, you stop, and then nobody else knows their percentage. There's a couple districts right now in the state in Texas that are not ranking. So by law, you have to notify. You're required to tell students you're in the top 10%. And then we've spoken with them, and they do varying things from they only notify you they don't notify you you're in the top 10. They don't tell you where you are in the top 10. They just say you're in or you're not, because that's the law. Or they rank just to the top 10 and then they stop. But it's really just in who you notify. I mean, you still include everyone in that. And then that changes every year. So if we have 750 students in a class, top 10% is 75 students. If that class drops to 700 students, then top 10 drops to 70, or if it goes the other way, it increases to 80, so it's always a variable. And we rank at the end of each semester, and then our senior year, we rank at the end of the third 9 weeks, but we have a date in there to include for dual credit, because sometimes our dual credit doesn't come in, and so we just have to receive it by May 15th.
Did we extended that this last year?
We did, yes, because of COVID.
Any other thoughts for Deanna as she's putting this presentation together coming up?
For September.
I haven't heard that. That'd be great thought.
if I were to be valedictorian and I took Matt was talking about the CTE pathway, right? You mentioned earlier that example.
Mhm.
That ain't gonna happen. I'm not gonna be valedictorian.
You could.
As long as you took AAP courses.
Absolutely. I mean, you could, as long as you're in these classes.
But someone else could take more than 8.
They could.
Counted as.
But it wouldn't count.
They
in the
could.
Counted as
process.
the same.
So they could take them. They could take them their sophomore year. So I'm not weighting this course. Somebody could they could put an AP course in their sophomore year. But then, even then, it's going to depend on where's their GPA and does it raise their GPA or not raise their GPA. I mean, just depending. I mean, you have to do really, really well in it. It's going to open the door for more.
I was
Right.
just gonna say, I think it's an opening of the door for more opportunity to do that than there has been before.
Absolutely.
They would still have to, in order to compete with other kids in their class, take those AP courses or on-ramps courses, but they have an opportunity to complete their course sequence and still dive deep into the learning there, just like everybody else does.
I mean, you could have a kid that takes every welding class that we have and takes, I guess it would have to be 9 AP courses, assuming that they took one in their freshman year, right?
Right.
And they could still come out. Yeah.
They can actually get an
Vying for valedictorian and getting in the top 10% are two very different approaches.
Melinda just made a good point. I mean, you have people in this system that can complete their industry-based certifications, finish those CTE pathways, and be competing for the top 10 of their class.
Well, this, what I'm looking at shows that everybody will have the opportunity to take CTE or any elective that they want now. Everybody.
I mean, what am I missing here? What's the downside?
There's a lot more people. You can hire
Yeah.
APs.
I mean, it'll change our course enrollments. It'll change course enrollments in courses. Some courses will not have as many students enrolled, some courses will have more. It'll increase our CTE enrollments. It's gonna be, some system procedures to get in play to make that happen with student choice, and then we'll have to, but, trying to open up doors for
I mean,
kids.
when I was listening to you, I'm sorry,
No,
Dan.
no, no, okay.
I'm trying to think to myself, what's the downside of all this? I mean, I'm trying to think to myself, what's the downside that would make me shy away from it? Can't think of anything.
I'm a little concerned about our counselors getting on board, like understanding all the ins and outs for every student and what would be best to counsel them. That's probably my only,
So I think counselors already have a challenge and we'll continue to work to support them in professional learning. I mean, it's already hard right now to counsel students because no two students are the same. But it opens up the door for some kids to counsel. Like right now, if you're gaming this and you're really fine and you ask a counselor, they're going to tell you what courses are weighted lower that lower your GPA and then this one, you're gonna see courses included that are not included. But right now, CTE courses are a no weight, so they're not in or out, but because they're not competing against this with equal weight, the kids they just won't choose them, they'll just take 15 courses, and this really puts a choice on students.
So just to be clear on that one, when you say there are no weight, they still get 4.0 for that.
They still have 4.0 in an unweighted GPA, they count, but when you go to weight your GPA, CTE course, unless it's a math or science, unless it's like in this math or science courses falling under that, like culinary arts, it's just not included in your weighted GPA. And so what students do is they fill all those options with AP, where right now a student would literally say, so if I go back to that, I'm an English and a social studies major, I'm gonna really ask myself, do I really need to sit in AP calculus and or do I wanna pursue the culinary arts? I mean, we have kids now, they're gonna take every AP course and they'll tell you their freshman year, I'm not taking any CTE classes. They don't think they can.
Alright, so there are potentially facility impacts to this change. There are staffing impacts to this change, right? So you wanna know like where does this right?
Potentially.
That's,
Potentially.
yeah, potentially increase in costs, potentially limitations in what the facilities will support, on top of whatever challenges we already have in that area. There are positive funding impacts potentially, where because as CTE goes up, there's bonus credits that kind of go with that.
There is weighting impact, that's funding weight, you're correct.
Right.
Absolutely, you receive higher weighting for students in CTE
Right.
courses.
classes might fill up with 4 kids if kids really wanna take them, then find out the class is already full.
But yeah, and that's kind of that facility and staff impact, right? 'Cause
And here's what I would say on that is a current challenge that we have right now.
Yeah.
So, we work through those things, and we would continue to have to work through those things, in the school system, but that's the way school sign up for kids for their courses for the next year works. And as we see trends and can look at data, that's when you start talking about making facility changes and staffing changes and expanding programs, especially when you do it in context of local workforce needs for the long term. When I go back to your vision statement that you adopted in the tagline, inspiring dreams, empowering futures, to me, these types of policies really start to push us toward doing that. Are we able to allow kids to explore their passions and interests in school? And are we empowering them for their futures to be well set up for their future career pathway? And I think policies like this tend to help us get there, and then that would help us make adjustments along the way in our facility and staffing planning.
So this doesn't would never adversely impact the kids.
Here's the way I see that is that we would roll this in the policy, so you would go in as a freshman class and move up, and so you would have a phased-in approach. So it wouldn't negatively impact any of the students that are currently in the system. You would start with your freshman class and move forward from there. I think the challenge is, change is a challenge. And so education, training, support, professional learning that goes with it, ensuring that everybody knows the system well and is counseled well to work with kids and their families, I think would be the biggest challenge that we would have at the beginning. And then from there, continuing to make sure that a family that's got a junior in high school and a freshman in high school, they're living in two different GPA systems for a little while. And you've got to be able to work with the families and understanding that too. And I think those would be the biggest challenges that we would have off the start, or off the beginning. But again, I think that I applaud Deanna. So this has been a long study, and I applaud Deanna and her team and teachers. They've had teacher meetings, they've had student surveys, they've had all sorts of different things going on to help us get to a point where we could learn as much about it in this policy committee meeting and start to ask the question, do we want to take the next step in recommending any policy changes in the future? And so I do want to point out, while we started this for the exact reason that Deanna pointed out and that Janet asked her about earlier, you also asked us to do this. In the policy committee, you asked us to study policy EIC local and to dive into it. So that's the other reason that we were diving in.
Dan, one of our meetings, we talked about just not rank, whether we rank or not rank. Remember that?
I do.
Okay, so we're moving away from that concept.
Well, this is still a ranking system.
I'm talking about not ranking at all.
We could not rank at all. What we had talked about, and then what our group talked about, that's when you think about shifts and you think about change shifts with your community, that's a big change shift in what we currently have. And knowing that in Texas, we're required
Right.
to rank the top 10. Now, there are schools where we are talking with schools who do not rank, and we're listening to them on their pros and their cons, and certainly something we could
We
consider.
talked about Westlake. Remind me, what did we learn about Westlake High
So
School?
Westlake is a non-ranking school, so is Eames, and what that does is that opens up the door for colleges when a student applies to a college and the college asks for their ranking, then the student, if they're not in the top 10, would say, I come from a school that's non-ranking. And then it forces a college to use a different criteria than there's the criteria they have set up for ranking students. And that varies by every college in terms of what they look at.
And for Westlake, it increased their college admissions, did it not?
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, it increased their college admissions to big Texas schools, particularly A&M and UT, is where they were seeing a lot more students get accepted. The same thing happened with Belton ISD after their first year. They started in 2019. They increased acceptance to those big schools.
When you guys reported that to us, I found that a bit odd,
But again, it forces a college to look at the students differently from students that come from ranking high schools. And so remember, all high schoolers rank. If they have a ranking policy, I shouldn't have said that way. For the majority of Texas schools have a ranking policy, and that ranking is regardless of school size. So I could be a valedictorian of a class size of 800. I can be a valedictorian of a class size of 15. And I'm considered a valedictorian, and actually in Texas have automatic admission. And so what doesn't stay the same across Texas schools are the number of students in the class, the courses that they offer. So because we are a large school district, we offer almost every AP course. We offer multiple CTE pathways in a smaller school district would not. So that just because even if I make it into the top 10% of a high school, that's not the same criteria across the state of Texas as to what top 10% means. Because I could be top 10% of the school that offers no AP courses. I could be top 10% of the school that all I had were AP courses. And then that's why this is that's what I think makes this even more complex, because it's been left up to each district to determine.
So we got three options, right? We've got keep what we currently have.
Keep what we currently have.
We've got don't rank, or we've got modify the ranking, right? And so we don't think as a community, we are ready to rip off the huge Band-Aid and go to ranking, right? So we don't think we're ready for that. And so the question is, do we either modify the ranking or do we keep it the same? And I think we pretty much come to, I think we need to modify it. And so I think if we kind of, that's maybe one part of the conversation is, these are three options. And so why do we think modifying the ranking is the appropriate path? Here's a good example that we can talk through. What are the pros and cons of this approach sort of compared to our current ranking system, right? Because that's really our two real choices, right? And in that, right, I think you want to look at it through a couple different sets of goggles, right? You look at it through the kid's eyes, what does this mean? Through the counselor's eyes, what does this mean? Through a college or university's eyes, what does this mean? From a district standpoint, what does this mean? I mean, one thing maybe we kind of danced around a little bit is, from the district standpoint, we actually get to celebrate achievement in more diverse ways. Like more diverse achievement. Although fine arts seems to be thrown out a little bit here, but I don't know. Like those are all things like I would want to hear with a big group.
Okay.
So, and then what are the gotchas? Right? I want to go down the line and shine light. Like, what do you not like about this? What do you not like about this? What do you not like about this?
We're not there yet, we don't have a policy in front of us.
But
We're ready when you are.
I do think when I think about the entire board, we do really have to go back to, what is our current policy? So what, like you say, what are those options that we have? Because we've wrestled through those along the way, but the full board has not.
Yeah.
I appreciate you all diving in. Are there any last things for Deanna and putting together this presentation?
It's really good work. Thank you.
I have an amazing team, so this is part of them.
If you think about the hours, so the amount of hours that we've spent in policy committee talking about this over the past 8 months, and the amount of hours that have gone in from our teaching and learning team studying various groups across the state in various districts and their policies, there's been hours and hours and hours of studying this issue, gathering data from our system, trying to make sure that policy, again, where the board lives in policy and governance, isn't negatively impacting our students in ways that we.
When you can run your learning experience and not be penalized for it, I mean, I don't see, how can that not be?
And still allow for the competition to rise to the top.
Yeah.
You still have that piece, and I think that was the part that was so hard for me in the beginning of this, is like, if we mess with that, I'm not gonna be able to, and so this is why I don't get paid to do this. Is that you actually have this creative idea to allow for both of those. and I think that's fantastic.
That's good work.
I have a very creative team who wrestled through
Good
this.
work, ladies.
They are very talented, I appreciate it.
Like I said in one of y'all's conversations.
Feel free. They take a while.
Yeah.
You can hear them yelling every time.
There's some yelling, there's some crying. You never know what there's emotion, but there is a lot of emotion. But I'll end it with, we are just on a constant path to do what's right for all kids.
Last point to make on this too, I think, with the variability in these policies across the state and by district, and the variability by higher education institution, the most important thing we can do is what's right for our community. So what's right for Belton ISD students is what we've got to focus on, and that it's not about saying we've got to just model after somebody else. So I think we're on a good path.
We're gonna meet full time, so don't schedule another topic from our shark stand.
Well, we got a whole lot going on, so no, just kidding.
We need some full time.
Anything else?
Prepare for a late meeting.
Any other topics?
Any issues, concerns, future agenda, or administrative reports? Anybody? Chris? Ken? I guess we stand adjourned.
Thank you.